Hiya folks. 3 people in the comments section asked me to give my opinion of Alan Watts. Which, okay, I'll see what I can do with that one. When I first started studying Zen in the early 80s, as I've mentioned many times, I wasn't into Zen. It wasn't like I was seeking out Zen, and I only really became aware of Zen after it was introduced to me by Tim McCarthy in that class at Kent State University called Zen Buddhism. So the first books I read about Zen were the ones that he had on his syllabus, which were Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Shunryu Suzuki, The 3 Pillars of Zen by Philip Kapleau, and a book called Unsui, which is a diary of a Rinzai monk in Japan. And I believe I also read What the Buddha Taught, and I'm not sure if that was on the syllabus or not. When I went out from there, and with a mild interest in Buddhism, looked at the books that were on the shelves of B. Dalton's bookstore and Walden Books, that were the chains that were in the malls at the time. About the only books you could find about Zen were D.T. Suzuki's various books and Alan Watts. And a lot of those were over 30 years old by then. Even Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind was more than 10 years old by the time I read it. And I'd formed a kind of an opinion about D.T. Suzuki based on some of the things Tim had said. I knew that he represented the Rinzai school of Zen and that he wasn't actually a monk or anything. And his books were very scholarly, and I did read a couple of them. I remember reading the Zen Teaching of No Mind at one point, and some other stuff like that. But Alan Watts, I think Tim had said something mildly dismissive about Alan Watts, and I thought, well, I wasn't that interested in Alan Watts to begin with, so I didn't really bother with him. And so for most of my time studying Zen, I was blissfully unaware of anything that Alan Watts had to say. The thing that got me aware of Alan Watts was about 10 years ago. I was giving some talks or something up in Montreal, and I was staying at my friend Linda's house. And around the corner from Linda's house is a used bookstore. And at that used bookstore, I saw a copy of This Is It by Alan Watts, and I thought, oh, okay. And wasn't much going on that day, so I kind of started reading it, and I ended up reading the whole essay, This Is It, which is the title essay of the piece, and enjoying it a lot, and I bought the book. And here it is. Here's the copy of This Is It that I bought in Montreal 10 years ago. And I thought, well, this Alan Watts fella seems to have some interesting stuff to say. I never actually read the rest of the book, and in fact, just now, preparing for this video, I noticed that it says LSD and Satori right on the front, and I'm like, what's that about? And there's an essay at the very end called The New Alchemy. And I just skimmed that over a couple of minutes ago, and it's his LSD experiences. And, given the time it was written, which was, I believe, the early 60s, when LSD was still legal and everything, it's not so terrible, but it's also kind of, it's not my favorite part of the book. My favorite part of the book is that essay, This Is It. Apart from that, somebody gave me this a while ago, which I haven't read. I'm sorry if you're the one who gave it to me. I'll look into it one of these days. And my publishers, New World Library, who published all of my books except for Hardcore Zen, sent me this very kindly. The Collected Letters of Alan Watts last year, which is one of their books, and I haven't read it yet either, but I intend to take a look at this one too. The upshot of that whole thing being I am no expert on Alan Watts. I read his Wikipedia page too to prepare for this video because I was like, I don't even know his life story. So the main things I'm familiar with are that essay, This Is It, and a series of videos put together by Trey Parker and Matt Stone, the guys who created South Park, based on some of Alan Watts' lectures. And also to prepare for this video, I went and looked at those. I found a set of them, and there's about 15 minutes worth, so it's not a lot of material, but I think it's really, really strong stuff. There's nothing in that 15 minutes worth of videos based on Alan Watts' lectures that I could object to at all, and some of which I found really, really insightful. I recommend you look at those. I'll leave a link below in case you want to go check them out. Other than that, I don't know a whole lot about the guy. There's bits and pieces of his stuff that I think have a real insight and show a real understanding of Zen philosophically. Now, what I read on Wikipedia said that Watts kind of rejected Zazen, which means he was only getting the intellectual part of Zen philosophy. And if you're not doing Zazen, you're not going to get the whole of Zen philosophy. Zen philosophy is, as Nishijima Roshi said, a philosophy of action. It's a philosophy that you do. It's not a philosophy that you just think about. So as far as the thinking about it part of Zen philosophy goes, I think Alan Watts, at least in the material I've read, seems to have had a good grasp of it. But probably the fact that he didn't do Zazen is why some of his other stuff is not quite as strong. Like his insights into the LSD experience, while I'll tell you what, I had to kind of skim it because he's mostly telling about his experiences tripping, and reading the experiences of somebody else tripping on drugs is just boring to me. So, I'm just trying to get to the meat of it, and I didn't really find it, so I'm not that into that essay. And also, when I was looking at Wikipedia, I discovered that he died at age 58, probably due to alcoholism. The Wikipedia page is a bit vague on that, but they said he was a heavy alcoholic, and when you die at 58 as a heavy alcoholic, I have to assume the alcohol had something to do with it. So, my other supposition there, speculation, is that maybe if he'd done the actual practice of Zazen, it might have been able to help him work with the whatever was driving him to become an alcoholic and eventually kill himself much too young. So there you go. I'm sort of on the fence about Alan Watts, which is why I wasn't particularly interested in doing a video about him, but people asked, so I'll do it. And all I can say is This Is It is a really good essay, and those Trey Parker, Matt Stone videos are really good stuff, and there's probably a lot of other really good stuff out there in the Alan Watts library of stuff. But there's also some clunkers out there too, so buyer beware. I think when he talks philosophy, when he talks about his kind of worldview and his understanding of how things are put together, he's on solid ground. When he starts talking about doing acid as a way to understand life, the universe, and everything, yeah, I'm not that hot on that. And I know he had some other kind of oddball views of things. There's an essay about sex and spirituality in here that I haven't read, and I'm kind of going, I'm not sure about what that's going to be, but who knows. There you go. It's kind of an on-the-fence video about Alan Watts. I hope that satisfies the people who asked about him. I'll continue to look into him and see if I find more stuff, and maybe I'll comment about it later after that. And if you want to continue allowing me to make these comments about things, you can donate via PayPal and Patreon. As I always say, that's how I make my living. My bulk of my income comes from my Patreon and PayPal supporters, and not from speaking fees and not from book royalties. So thank you very much for your ongoing support. We'll see you later with another video. Bye.